Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to dive into the news of the week. It's been an interesting couple days to start off June, so let's jump right in. Good morning, Dee. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I think these are some interesting topics for us to dive into. Some of them are complex, I guess is the word.
But first off, how was your Memorial Day? This is actually the Memorial Day week. Did
Oh
you
yeah.
take any time off at all?
I didn't do any like what you would normally consider work, I guess, on actual Memorial Day. I mean, it was kind of a chill day. We just kind of hung out, grilled up some food, and kind of cleaned up and stuff like that. I mean, we've been so busy; it's been hard to do just simple household stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. You have 3 days off and then takes like 3 days to recover from those 3 days off. I
Yeah,
had
it's
three
like
days off
okay,
and I was
well,
like, man, I'm so relaxed. Now
let's
I have
get
to.
3 days off. It's time to tackle all that yard work that I've been putting off.
I know, exactly. But yeah, let's jump into the first topic of the day. So, Elon Musk made a comment that for Tesla employees, there will be no remote work. Everyone must come back in the office. So, basically, it was an internal memo that was sent to management that got leaked that said it was a bit passive aggressive, but you have to work in the office at least 40 hours a week. This is a big conversation, and this has come up over and over and over again. And you and I have mentioned this before in previous podcasts that this conversation actually started a long time ago when Skype was kind of the only remote platform being used for the most part. I mean, I think there was WebEx at the time, but and Marissa Mayer was over at Yahoo, and she had come into power of becoming CEO, and she said, I was looking at the VPN numbers. I don't feel like everybody's working hard. Everyone must come back to the office and work
Hmm.
in the office. Okay. So, fast forward to the pandemic where everyone is working from home remotely. Productivity is up 40% for people who
Hmm.
are working from home. People are killing it, record profits. All these tech companies are doing great. Okay.
Well, let
And
me
now here,
touch on the fact that Marissa Meyer policy for Yahoo didn't quite work out for them.
gonna kind of get to that, which that it actually did not work out for them clearly. Um, but like as we're in the pandemic, we're getting all these numbers saying that remote work is working great, and people are working even more than they did before. They're happier because they don't have to commute. It's almost like getting a raise basically because you don't have to pay to commute anymore or park if you're going to go to the city and that kind of stuff. And when I heard this comment from Tesla, I had two sides in my brain. One side was, yes, this kind of makes sense for a hardware company. And you and I have talked about this. Like when you're working on
Mhm.
hardware stuff, like building cars and stuff like that, you kind of have to be in person. You're kind of touching things and working on, physical things. It's a little different than if you're working in software where everything can completely be done remotely. But this whole black and white thing doesn't work for me, right? I believe that if you have the capability to work from home and remote work works fine for you, do it. Like, what's wrong with
Mhm.
that? There's nothing wrong with that at all. So, this whole black and white kind of thinking that is going on right now in the Valley, and even Apple got into this where they were, going to basically demand that everybody come back to the office for the most part. And then they kind of reverted on it because what do you think? I mean, has the world changed and all these companies just have to adapt to it? Or do you feel like some of these companies just need to be back in the office full time?
Well, I'm going to amend to something that you said. You said that Tesla says no more remote work. And that's not exactly what the internal memo says. He says that people need to be in the office at least 40 hours a week. He doesn't say that all work needs to be done in the office. So the expectation is, at least the way I read it, was that, okay, you do your 40 hours in the office and then you do your other 40 hours wherever you want. So that's kind of, I think, the expectation for Tesla in particular is that 40 hours is just kind of where you start. And to be honest, that's not uncommon for people to work, 50, 60 hours in Silicon Valley. Getting up into
Yeah.
80 hours is quite a bit much, but it doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense for, he called out managers in particular in that memo. And I
Yeah.
think it makes sense for managers to be in the office at, I don't know, 40 hours a week, maybe 32 or something like that. and have a day to actually work on other things. But all of the data we're seeing, even including for hardware companies, is productivity is up, design capabilities are up. People are able to think more creatively. People are able to work in hours that make more sense for them. Your hiring possibilities open up significantly. I don't think this makes sense, and I don't know where it's coming from when I think the main issue that Tesla has, at least from a production standpoint, is just the availability of silicon in order to increase their production. I don't think that having their employees coming into the office is going to make TSMC make more chips faster.
Yeah. So I have talked to quite a few people in the industry and asked them about this comment and stuff. And what some of them have said is that definitely, like, there is some magic to being in person, and I would agree with this.
Sure.
Like, I kind of feel like sometimes when you and I are with clients and we're like noodling with them and like you're having lunch with them and just like laughing and talking about these projects and really shaking things up and stuff, some good stuff comes out of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of sparks the beginning of something, and then we go off into our own corners and start working on it, right? So I understand there's some magic there, and for sure I think there's a balance. But what this actually did was create a bigger conversation around how much flexibility or control you want to allow employees to have, right? So I've always been, and so have you, on the side of let the employee do what works best for them as long as they're getting their work done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in, let's say, data analytics, right? It's like you're most likely going to be working probably a little bit isolated and kind of crunching numbers and looking at things. If you want to do it from home, do it from home, right? Like, why does that
Yeah.
matter, right? Or come into a meeting every once in a while and share your results. If you're in marketing, different story. You know, you're out on stage presenting, you're probably, practicing presentations and things like that. So you're going to see probably more interaction on that side. Sales, sales is one of those things where, yeah, a lot of it does well over Zoom, but there is some magic to being in person and taking people
Mm-hmm.
out to dinner and having conversations about, big sales that you're hoping to close and stuff like that. But why not just give the flexibility and give the control to the person who you hired and pay a lot of money for, who you trust to do a good job? And I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And I wanted to point one other thing out, and I want to get your comment on it, which is that on the complete flip side of Elon is the CEO of Airbnb. Okay. And his comment just 2 weeks ago was, hey, if you want to work remotely forever, by all means do it. And if you stay within the United States, you can keep your same pay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
He's doubling down on the idea that we're doing great. Everything's going great. So if you guys are happier that way, then let's do it. And in the 2 weeks following that comment, they had over 1 million people check out the jobs available on Airbnb's website.
Yeah.
The most they've ever had. Where is it? You know what I mean? Like, where's the line? Like, how do you figure this out? Is it just a moment in time, or is this a movement?
Well, I think that one of the things that's happening here is that you have kind of diametrically opposed companies, right? Airbnb is essentially a travel company. So it's kind of like for them to say you can work anywhere and, as an employee of this company, it's kind of like, WeWork saying like, hey, you can work in our WeWork offices, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of their product.
Yeah.
And then it makes sense for them to do that and for them to be kind of the outlier in that direction because that's their product. I think ultimately it's somewhere in the middle, but Tesla's case, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. It makes sense for there to be collaboration space and places for people to work on hardware, but not everything that Tesla does is hardware. And I think software is incredibly important for them. And a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
hardware development that they need to do, not all of it is actually hands on with something physical. There's a lot of design work. There's a lot of CAD work that goes into developing these kinds of things, or even wiring schematics and things like that. And what I do a lot of data analysis, and it is really hard to do it in an office. It's incredibly hard to do it in an office. There's too many
Yeah.
distractions. You get called into things all the time. People come by and chat with you. Like in order to kind of shut out the world for a little bit and focus on the data that's in front of you, that is the best place to do that is at home where you can control your environment and focus on what you need to focus on. But then things swing the other way, and there's time to talk about that data and have the conversations and go back and forth. And a lot of times that's best done when you're around those people that you need to have the conversation with and not constricted to, so and so has 1 hour for a meeting. So
Yeah.
there's a time and place for everything. But I think this is really going to hurt Tesla. I think it's a really bad idea. Like we know from the data that productivity is up when people have the ability flexibility to work where they want to work.
Hmm.
And we know that not having that commute into work it equates to a roughly a $40,000 a year raise for people.
Hmm.
So for Tesla, who is in this very critical moment where their stock price is down and still overvalued, they have competitors coming in aggressively, especially from Volkswagen. The job market is super tight. Like Jerome Powell's recent report from the Federal Reserve said that there are two job openings for every unemployed person in the country right now. There's a lot of competition for employees. So now you're going to have to pay more for talent to come in. Your stock is who knows what's going to happen with it, especially with all of the things that are circling around Elon Musk right now. And you've got competition coming in. It could very easily be, a year or two out from like experiencing what Netflix is experiencing right now,
Hmm.
where Volkswagen's going completely electric. They have greater manufacturing capabilities than you do, at least as far as volume, and they are gobbling up market share. And this stock is way overvalued currently. So it could be a real issue.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see that side of it. I mean, there's a couple other pieces to this as well. So some people have said like it's easy to have that perspective when you're older like we are. Meaning that, when you're younger, it's like you want to hang out with people, you know what I mean? You want to be around. It's
Sure.
the energy of like being in an office and running into coworkers and going out to lunch and that kind of excitement and fun of like growing your career and you just got out of college, and that kind of stuff. You don't want to sit in your one bedroom
Mhm.
apartment in San Francisco all alone and just work all day long, right? Like you want to
Well, I
have a
don't know how much
life
that's
that
an
is growing.
issue. Like, are there a lot of companies that are saying like you cannot come into the office? We don't want you here.
No, not at all. See, that's the key, right? Is that like when I talk about flexibility, I just say, "Hey, look, maybe we used to have 3 offices, but now we have 1, right? And you're more than welcome to come to that office anytime you want, but you don't have to if you can get your work done." That's all it is. That's just what the
Hmm.
policy should be. And then the managers of the departments or the groups, like if you and I were together co-managing a group of let's say 5 or 6 researchers and designers or something like that, and we're all working on this big project together, maybe every once in a while we would say, "Hey, let's meet up at this place and get together," and that kind of stuff. And then if someone says, "Oh, I can't come because I'm sick," or a friend of mine's flying into town. Do you mind if I just zoom in really quickly and then take a couple hours off, do this or do that? I'd just be like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
I don't. I think that when you force people to do things, it creates resentment and it creates frustration over time because ultimately people are trading their time for money for sure because we need it to live and all that, but
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be so concrete. It doesn't have to be when we have the
Yeah.
tools. Why did we build these tools if we're not going to use them?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for companies to provide guidelines for which activities are important to be done in the office. So for hardware and hardware prototyping, it's like, okay, cool. If you're actually making a 3D print of a hardware prototype,
Yep.
maybe people should come into the office and kind of hang out together for a day and or two or three, whatever it takes, in order to really dig into kind of the form factor, the ergonomics, all the things associated with hardware, and get that worked out. And then they can go back to being more flexible if they want to be in the office, if they want to be out of the office.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and if you just look at this other statistic here that only 40 to 50% of all New York City office space is being used right now, that's crazy because New York City and San Francisco office space is like some of the most premium office space in the world. Like people love to be working in downtown San Francisco or Manhattan, like having that energy and that life. It's so fun. It's so exciting. Like I've been there and in that space.
Mhm.
And to see that only 40 to 50% of office space is filled right now, that's that's a sign, right? That's a sign
Yeah,
that
I
a lot of
mean,
these companies have pulled back and decided to just focus on allowing people to work remotely for
yeah.
financial reasons, right? Because
Well, I think
office
that
space is expensive.
I look at this and I think to myself, all right, New York City and Manhattan specifically, and San Francisco are terrible places to have offices. They're just logistically really terrible places to have an office.
But they're so
People have
fun,
offices there
D.
because young people enjoy it, but it's like, all right, well, it's a pain to get there. It's a pain to leave. It's the you might be able to get walk and get some nice lunches and stuff, but like this. At least in the Bay Area, there's good food everywhere. You don't have to be restricted to office space in San Francisco. And then if you have anything that you need to come and go, I remember at one point I was working with somebody and they had a hardware prototype that was incredibly sensitive and they were going to take it on the bus with them. And I was like, do not take that
I
prototype on the bus. I will come pick you up if you don't have a car.
remember that
Um,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense. They can save a lot of money by not paying quite so much on massive office space. And you know what? San Francisco, New York City, those are places that are heavily impacted by housing shortages.
Hmm.
So free that up for housing, and then people can work from home and then have some office space here and there for collaboration. Like let's get rid of these like cubicle hell spaces and focus office spaces on collaborative work.
It's funny. I just heard the other day, as a side note, that the movement from open space offices is now moving back to more cubicles slash closed space offices. You know how we had that movement where everyone was like, I can't sit in a cubicle anymore. I'm going to explode. And then eventually
Because
all the design changed. And then it was open space where everyone could see everybody. And there's like coffee machines next to every desk. Right. And then now it's moving back to, I can't get any work done.
yeah,
So can we actually have offices again?
well, stop trying to make people do head down work in like a glorified classroom, right? Just let them do it where they want to do head down work, and then just basically build, some places where you can go and just optimize that space for collaboration. Make them
Yeah.
like I want to say like conference rooms because that's a place for meetings. It's not really a place for collaboration, but like collaborative workspace where tools are organized in such a way that they can communicate while they're doing their work.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of the head down work, maybe have some private spaces associated with that. But other than that, people, they can go do that work at home or at a coffee shop or a library or anything like that. As long as they're getting their work done, then let's give people some guidance and the flexibility to do it in the way that is most effective for them.
Exactly. Well, hey, we should probably switch to our second topic here, our kind of final topic of the day. We just picked two of them today since they were kind of big ones. So Sheryl Sandberg has resigned as the COO of Meta. So she'll work with Mark on a transition plan, and her last day will be in the fall. And she wants to focus more on her foundation and also spending time with her family. She's going to stay on as a board member also. So this is actually really interesting because we've talked about this before. Is that there's like this feeling in the valley right now that a lot of these older companies, like Facebook and uh, all of them, like Microsoft, Google, all that kind of stuff. At a certain point, the leadership needs to change. It needs to shift. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to adjust with the culture. It needs to adjust with like a new generation of kind of employees coming in. And I've always felt that like if Cheryl and Mark left, and let's say they were still on the board, but they had new leadership, new blood, younger, maybe some younger people in there that were focused on their big goals, which is, metaverse stuff or whatever, that the company's overall brand perception and the way in which people viewed their efforts would be more positive because there's just been so much bad stuff kind of coming out of Facebook for a long time. And, we've met a lot of people that have worked there and stuff and said that they had like some, strong feelings about why they just wouldn't want to work there again and moral reasons and things like it's just a lot of messy stuff kind of going on. And so to me, this was kind of like a sign like maybe this is the beginning of a lot of turnover from CEOs and COOs of older companies that are still really big and doing really well, but it's time to have a changing of the guard. What do you think?
Well, I think in social in particular, it kind of requires kind of a refreshing of leadership more frequently because the experience of social needs to be refreshed more frequently. Like I kind of think of social kind of in the same way that people talk about nightclubs, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a nightclub that's popular because it's new for about 6 months, and then basically it goes into hiatus and rebrands and re-releases, and you kind of have to continually refresh it. And the same thing I think happens with social, where we went from MySpace to Facebook to Instagram to TikTok, and now Facebook is at best like 2 or 3 generations old.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of that comes down to leadership with Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg bringing kind of a mentality that worked in what 2008 or so.
Yeah.
Um, but that's ancient history now from a social platform perspective, and people need to kind of bring in a new mindset in order to change what the experience is. Otherwise, I think all social platforms eventually become toxic, because it seems like the pattern where you have one social platform where friendly people are, and then eventually less friendly people come in to later on in order to kind of fill things in because it's becoming popular, and then the friendly people leave and they go somewhere else, and
Hmm.
that is ultimately what happens. And eventually you need to kind of like just shut it down and move somewhere else, and it's what happened with MySpace. It's what's happening currently with Facebook, and what is beginning to happen with Instagram. And in order to kind of keep those platforms relevant, you might have to get some new leadership in and maybe shake up the culture a little bit.
I agree with that 100%. And I know they've been hiring a lot in some of the labs that we have either
Oh
interacted
yeah.
with or knew, in the past of people that we knew that were there. We haven't worked with those labs or anything to be completely transparent. But we know people that have gone there, and a lot of new people being hired, a lot of people that we knew from other companies moving over there. Focusing on virtual reality and focusing on the metaverse and stuff like that, things that people find to be interesting and potentially transformative. But like, the leadership is everything, right? It all comes down from the top. And I think that this is a time. I think this is a big opportunity actually for Meta. I think if Mark, which I highly doubt he would, but like would step down and bring some new blood in, I think there could be some great opportunities for the company in the future, especially if they can, move away from some of the controversies and issues and the original Facebook stuff that's kind of dragging them down essentially towards
Yeah.
a bigger goal, in my opinion. But like, I have a question about social in general. So what's on the plate right now? So we still have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Snap, we have Pinterest. I mean,
I mean, do we have Snap?
do we have well, that's how dare you? That's that was very very rude. No, so here's the thing, the reason why D made that comment is because people keep talking about like how transformative Snap could be, but like I don't know, it just feels like I don't know, that feels like a company that has some probably really talented people there, but they're kind of being held down by the fact that the company itself really isn't super transformative right now. And it seems like it might get bought. Like, I just feel like this is the type of company gets gobbled up by a large company, and then that large company ends up managing a social platform. You know what I mean?
I don't know if there's a lot of appeal to buy Snap. I'm just being completely honest. I look at it and I wonder if it's like largely a platform of bots and marketers at this point. So, not to get derailed by Snap, but I feel like it is a platform that exists. They're trying to get kind of away from software in a weird way and develop like camera drones and things.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really see it unless it's designed for shooting TikToks for you. I think that might be their value. The biggest use case for a drone that can shoot things for you is to shoot content for TikTok, which is kind of the sad reality of where things are for Snap these days.
Yeah, and I think there's this belief that when your company is starting to become more stagnant, and you and I have been caught in this trap before ourselves, and a lot of companies are, is that the innovation side is to do something completely new. Now, that does work sometimes. It really does. If you look at Amazon, right? Like they originally started with selling books and stuff, and now they have doorbells and Twitch and
Sure.
drones and right. They're overarching company. Same thing with Google, right? Is covering many industries and doing quite well in a lot of those different industries. That transition is traditionally challenging, and I think for Snap it's even more challenging because they're
Yeah.
only in the social space, but now you're getting into hardware. Oh my gosh, building hardware! Oh my god, it's so hard. Like you and I work with a lot of hardware and have in the past, and it's just
Mhm.
tremendously challenging, right? And so to me, it seems like the natural progression would not be hardware; it would be an evolution of software. But
Yeah. I mean, the
maybe
ultimate challenge.
but
Sorry.
my last comment, I was just going to say, but maybe they can't find another direction to go from a software perspective.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me because the issue that is somewhat inescapable for hardware is scalability.
Uh huh.
So and this is what Tesla's running into is that you can have a great system, but if it doesn't scale, then you're kind of locked. Your growth is locked. And this is what, companies like Peloton decided to do is that their hardware was an entry point for their software services. And it feels as though Snap is going the other direction. And I don't think it's the best idea, honestly.
Yeah. And have you ever met anyone or that worked there or anything? Or
No.
I
Well,
don't think
from
I
what I
have either.
understand, I don't even know if they have a Northern California presence. I think they're all in LA.
Yeah. They're in Silicon Beach. That's what they call it.
Okay.
Instead of Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach. Because they're right over
So
there in
you
Santa
were
Monica, I
saying
think.
something about like kind of the social landscape.
Yeah. So the social landscape. So it doesn't seem like there's been a ton of innovation in social recently, meaning like I haven't heard of too many startups really focusing on social. It seems like a lot of the talent seems to be heading toward Web3, crypto, blockchain development. And so it's kind of left these three, four, five companies to kind of just continue to chug along and do their thing. Um, but do you see that happening, or do you think with this new, kind of blockchain and kind of Web3 movement that a new form of social is about to come out of the woodwork? You know what I mean? And compete with them.
I don't know that Web3 in particular contributes anything for social. I think that elements will be kind of integrated into it. Like, you could have NFTs as a form of identity validation so that people you might maybe will have less frequent stolen accounts and things like that.
Uh huh.
Uh, when it comes to social, I look at platforms like Discord
Yep.
or there are some metaverse platforms that I think are interesting, like Roblox
Mm-hmm.
or Fortnite will probably have something. There's Together Labs with InView and their platforms.
Yep.
I think that the mistake that Facebook is making is first, they're not solving the problem with their existing platforms, and those problems they're going to take with them into their new ones. And that is the toxicity and disinformation, the constant arguing and yelling at each other that happens on Facebook is you don't really want a more immersive version of that. And I also think that really immersive metaverses are probably not where people are going to want to start. As somebody who's played video games for a while, where kind of metaverses have sprung up previously,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to like interacting with and meeting new people, you don't really necessarily want to jump into super immersive right away. You kind of want to ease into it, get to know people a little bit better, maybe have, even some mobile based experiences where you're kind of chatting and getting to know people a little bit
Mm-hmm.
before they can say things that they could say to your face.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
until when it comes to social, though, I think that until somebody can really solve the toxicity issues, then I feel like it's just spinning your wheels, and it's kind of like when your phone gets old a couple and your battery won't charge anymore.
Yep.
And you just need to throw it away and start a new one. I feel like that's kind of where we are with social, where social platforms are in a weird way kind of disposable. And until somebody figures that out, Discord I think has interesting ways of doing that, or Reddit actually has finally kind of come around to some interesting ways of doing that by empowering the community itself to moderate a little bit, and then
Yeah.
the platform has to step in every now and then if that particular community is just not being managed properly.
Mm-hmm.
Then that that seems to be a step forward because it's too difficult for the company to moderate everything within, especially voice enabled systems or different actions and things that can happen.
Oh, it's totally true. I mean, you look at Twitter, for example, and it's like they've been trying things. I mean, they haven't innovated a lot recently, but they tried some stuff early on and it didn't work. And
Mm-hmm.
I think social in general is very hard. And I think your analogy of it being like a nightclub is spot on, which is like it spins up, it's exciting, people are having fun, they're engaging. And then as it starts to turn toxic or like weird or creepy or any of those other things, suddenly
Yeah.
the next nightclub pops up and everybody leaves and goes to the next one.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've all had that experience where you're like, you go into a club or a concert or a bar or something like that. And then, you learn to recognize like, oh, people are starting to fight. It's time to go.
Yep. Yep. Things are
Because
starting to look nasty.
once the fights start to break out, it's just like, all right, well, this is over. There's no salvaging this. It's time to
Well,
go home.
actually, there's two things that are over. One, that night is over. And number two is the next time you think about a place to go to, you think back at the fight,
Yeah.
right? You're like, oh man, there's a fight there last time. Let's go somewhere else,
Yeah.
right?
I remember we went to a bar, I think it was for somebody's birthday downtown,
Uh huh.
and like a really bad fight broke out, and cops jumped in and pepper sprayed the people in like an enclosed like dance floor,
I
and it
remember
just hit
that.
everybody. And we never went back to that place ever again.
No, we didn't. Yeah, I remember that too. That was kind of weird. Yeah, that was that was a very weird night. Um, but yeah, you're right, and that's kind of where social is, and that's what it kind of looks like. And so when I hear like that Sheryl Sandberg stepping down and stuff like that, I don't blame her honestly. Like
Hmm.
she's been at the company for 14 years, and things are really really changing. And sadly, it doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be like more toxic in some ways.
Hmm.
Um, and when she started the company, just as like a side note, like she was there, I think 2007, 2008, with Mark, and it was like the company was like worth in the hundreds of millions, and then now it's like in the hundreds of billions. So I mean, they had a good run for their time. You know what I mean? Lots
Sure.
of controversy, lots of problems, lots of things that I'm definitely not happy with personally. But I could see why at this time and age and all that kind of stuff that a lot of these C-level executives at these big companies might want to transition out.
Yeah, and it within the context of what's going on right now, it's that Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call them, they're spending money like water. There's constant recruiters. I probably get something from them almost every day.
Yeah, me too.
I know you're getting the same. We know plenty of people who have left really good companies to go and work there because they have really interesting projects to work on.
Uh-huh.
It's a little kind of disconcerting that they're having this leadership change in the middle of this big spend.
Mhm.
So hopefully, for their own good, they've had all this planned out. This was all part of this was always part of the plan, and it will the transition is natural, and they already have somebody in mind for that role. If not, then we could see some real turmoil going on there.
Yeah, they already have someone that's transitioning in. I probably should have pointed that out, but it was someone who's working directly with Cheryl and stuff like that. And so he's
Okay.
gonna be taking over that role, and she's gonna be working with them for the next, I don't know, whatever, 6 months to help
Yeah.
transition into the job. But you know, it is what it is. I'm not a super fan of the company, but I definitely have been an eternal optimist when it comes to if you shake things up and if you change leadership and you focus on the right things, you can turn around some companies. And we saw that happen with Apple. We've seen that happen with Microsoft. I mean, people forget that like people were really down on Bill Gates back in the day, and he stepped
Mhm.
down and new leadership came in and all that kind of stuff, and people kind of love Microsoft right now. So, you know, there's definitely ways to make that transition. But I think this is a good time to wrap D for the day. Those were a couple interesting topics for us. So I just want to thank everyone so much for taking the time to listen to us today. We really appreciate it. Demetrius will be posting the links to many of these sources that we referenced on Twitter. So you can find us or follow us on Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast and the number one. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. You can also request us to talk about stuff. Sometimes the things that we talk about are from either listeners like yourself or friends say like, hey, will you guys kind of dig into X topic? And we really love that because it just allows us to kind of go deep on something we know is passionate or interesting to the rest of you. So anyways, thank you all. And we will see you all next week.